The forest does not announce which tree will grow tallest. It simply grows in silence, while the noisy ones fight for light and die early. I learned very early that the market behaves the same way. It does not reward noise. It does not reward urgency. It does not reward the man who needs to be seen winning. It rewards the one who can sit still while others panic, who can think clearly while others perform, who can remain invisible while others beg for recognition. Most people misunderstand stress in the market. They see it as danger. I began to see it as a signal, a quiet opening, a moment when human nature exposes itself. Because stress does something predictable. It strips away discipline, it reveals ego, it amplifies fear. And in that exposure, opportunity quietly appears. I did not always understand this. There was a time when I felt the same pull everyone feels. The need to act, the need to prove, the need to be right in front of others. I thought speed was intelligence. I thought visibility was strength. It took losses, not just of money, but of clarity, to understand the deeper game being played. Wealth is not built in public. It is built in private decisions no one applauds, and most people cannot tolerate that. They want validation. They want reassurance. They want someone to see them making the right move. But the moment you begin to perform for others, you are no longer thinking clearly for yourself. That is where the damage begins. I have watched intelligent people destroy their own advantage, not because they lacked skill, but because they could not resist being seen as skilled. There is a quiet force that works against anyone who begins to rise. It is not always visible. It does not always speak directly, but it exists. In rooms, in conversations, in subtle reactions. Envy, not the obvious kind, not the kind that shouts, the quiet kind, the kind that smiles and waits. People do not need to hate you to sabotage you, they only need to feel smaller in your presence. And when that feeling appears, something changes. They ask different questions. They give different advice. They watch more closely. They speak more casually, but with sharper intent. Most never realize when this shift happens. They continue sharing, explaining, revealing, thinking they are building connection. In reality, they are dissolving their own advantage. I began to understand that information is not just knowledge, it is leverage, and once given away carelessly, it cannot be reclaimed. That is when I developed what I now think of as the silent advantage. It is not a strategy in the traditional sense. It is a way of moving, a way of thinking, a way of protecting the things that actually matter. It begins with restraint. I never reveal the full extent of what I have, not because of fear, but because numbers change how people see you. The moment your worth becomes visible, you are no longer interacting as equals. You are interacting through perception, and perception is unstable. I have seen relationships shift over a single disclosure. Expectations grow, subtle resentments form, even kindness becomes calculated. So I learned to let people underestimate. There is a certain freedom in being misjudged, a certain safety in appearing smaller than you are. In the market, this translates into patience. When others believe you are inactive, you are often preparing. When they think you missed the opportunity, you are often waiting for a better one. Silence creates space, and in that space, clarity improves. I also stopped announcing my next move. There is a strange impulse people have to speak before they act, to declare intention as if it strengthens commitment. It does the opposite. The moment you announce a move, you invite noise, opinions, doubt, interference. Even well-meaning advice becomes friction. And worse, you begin to feel accountable to that declaration. Now you are no longer acting based on reality, but based on what you said you would do. I have watched investors hold losing positions, not because the logic remained sound, but because they had spoken too loudly beforehand. They were no longer protecting capital. They were protecting ego. So I learned to move quietly, to decide privately, to act without witness. It is a different kind of discipline, one that does not rely on external pressure, but internal clarity. The same principle applies to any edge I develop. If I find something that works, something subtle, something repeatable, I do not share it. Not because I am selfish, but because advantage, once exposed, rarely survives. People underestimate how quickly good ideas become crowded, how fast something effective becomes diluted once it spreads. In markets, in business, in life, the moment everyone knows, the opportunity is already fading. There is also a deeper psychological cost. When you share your edge, you begin to depend on others recognizing it, and when they don't, frustration appears. Doubt follows. Now your confidence is no longer anchored in results, but in validation. That is a dangerous place to stand. I prefer the quiet certainty of something that works, whether or not anyone else sees it. There is another mistake I see often, one that has nothing to do with markets, but affects everything. People believe they are helping their children by removing struggle, by guaranteeing outcomes, by ensuring comfort. I have seen the opposite happen. When you eliminate uncertainty, you eliminate growth. A person who knows they cannot fail rarely learns how to think. Wealth given without resistance does not create strength. It creates dependency. It weakens decision-making. It dulls awareness. I made a decision long ago that nothing meaningful would be handed down without effort attached, not as punishment, but as protection. Because the real inheritance is not money. It is judgment, discipline, the ability to operate without needing approval. Those cannot be gifted. They must be built. And finally, I learned to stop broadcasting. Success, charity, pain, struggle, all of it. There is a temptation to share everything, to turn life into a narrative others can follow. But not everything should be seen. When you broadcast success, you invite comparison. When you broadcast charity, you invite interpretation. When you broadcast pain, you invite weakness to be observed. Not everyone watching wants the best for you, and even those who do cannot help but filter your reality through their own. I began to keep more to myself, not in isolation, but in intention. I speak less about what I am doing. I show less of what I have achieved. I explain less of what I understand. And something interesting happens. The less you reveal, the more control you have. The less you perform, the clearer you think. The less you seek validation, the more stable your decisions become. There are moments, of course, when the noise gets loud, when the market becomes chaotic, when fear spreads quickly and confidence disappears. Those are the moments I wait for. Because panic is rarely precise, it is emotional. And emotion creates mispricing, not just in assets, but in behavior. I have found some of my best decisions came when others were desperate to escape. Not because I am fearless, but because I am prepared. Preparation is quiet work. It does not show up in headlines. It is built in long periods of stillness, where nothing seems to be happening. But something is. Understanding deepens. Patterns become clearer, reactions slow down. And when the moment arrives, action feels simple. Not easy, but simple. There is a difference. Over time, I stopped chasing outcomes and started refining process. I stopped measuring success by visibility and started measuring it by control. Control over emotion, control over information, control over timing. Because in the end, the market is not just a place where money moves. It is a mirror. It reflects impatience, ego, fear, insecurity, and those who cannot control themselves will always struggle to control their outcomes. I have made peace with moving differently, slower at times, quieter always, letting others rush ahead, letting them speak first, letting them believe they understand. There is no need to correct them. Time does that on its own, and time rewards those who do not need immediate reward. So I continue, as I always have. Observing more than speaking, thinking more than reacting, acting only when the conditions are clear and the noise has reached its peak. Because that is when the forest reveals its truth. The loudest trees fall first, and the ones that endure were never trying to be seen.